The biting wind of the Serra da Mantiqueira whipped through Livia's hair as she watched the mist dance over the mountains, a melancholic sway that seemed to mirror the storm in her soul. 6 years abroad had brought her a brilliant career, but couldn't erase the void left by her mother Maria's absence, an old wound that throbbed more fiercely with each passing day. Livia's desire, now undeniable, was to unravel the mystery of Maria's disappearance, to understand why the woman who raised her had simply vanished from her life. Deep down, the yearning for a genuine family connection was an abyss, and she feared that getting closer would only bring more disillusionment. There was an internal lie, a profound belief that any kindness was fragile, that true love was an impossible promise to keep, and that intimacy would always lead to pain. This distrust kept her at a safe distance, even as her heart cried out for closeness. The rented car, an old and noisy model, snaked along the narrow roads of the small, charming town of Lumiar, where Maria had spent her last known years. The simple houses with flowery verandas and wild, vibrant gardens contrasted with the faded image Livia held of her mother. With each turn, the landscape opened up, revealing stretches of Atlantic forest and crystal-clear streams. The scent of wet earth and wildflowers, brought by a gentle rain that had fallen overnight, filled the air, awakening almost forgotten memories, as if nature itself tried to speak to her. But what would she find, after all? The promise of a revelation hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. Her first stop was at her older sister Renata's house, a solid, modern construction that felt a little out of place with the village's rustic charm. Renata, always impeccable, with her carefully styled hair and a demeanor bordering on irritation, greeted Livia with a cold hug and a forced smile. She wanted to maintain the facade of a perfect life, of a family without problems, and Livia's presence, with her uncomfortable questions, seemed a threat to this carefully constructed image. Renata's house, impeccable and cold, was a reflection of its hostess. Livia tried to warm the atmosphere, but every word seemed to bounce off an invisible wall. She asked about their mother, Maria. Renata sighed, a rehearsed gesture of weariness. "Livia, we've talked about this. She just vanished, left no trace. We did what we could, but no one knows anything." The answer was too quick, devoid of the emotion Livia expected from someone who had lost their mother. There was no genuine sadness, only poorly disguised irritation. Livia sat on the raw linen sofa, feeling the discomfort of the situation. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for something familiar, a trace of her mother who at times seemed to have been erased from everyone's memory. There was a spot on the dark wooden shelf, above the disused fireplace, where Maria always kept a small picture frame, a rustic frame Livia herself had gifted years ago, containing an old photo of the two sisters and their mother smiling. But the space was empty, as if the image had never existed there. A cold shiver ran down Livia's spine. That photo was a treasure to Maria, a symbol of the family unity Renata so valued in her facade. Why would it disappear? The absence of that object, so small and seemingly insignificant, was like a silent scream in the middle of the room. It wasn't just a photo. It was a story, a concrete memory of Maria that had been removed. Livia felt the pang of distrust that had always accompanied her, now confirmed by such a trivial detail. She tried to hide her surprise. "Renata, what about Mom's things? Any documents, any clues?" Her sister rolled her eyes. "I've looked through everything, there's nothing. She must have taken what she thought was important, or threw it away." Maria was always a bit detached. Detached? Livia knew Maria was anything but detached from her memories. That was a lie, a distortion of the truth Livia couldn't ignore. This search for answers, for pieces of a life that seemed to have been stolen, is something many of us have felt, isn't it? That emptiness that drives us to pursue what seems lost. Before we continue this journey with Livia, I want to know, where are you following this story from? Write your name and city in the comments. It's important for us to know who is with us on this quest for justice. Renata offered coffee, but the gesture was more procedural than welcoming. Livia refused, feeling that every minute there was a burden. Her sister seemed anxious to end the conversation, to sweep Maria under the rug. "Don't you find it strange that no one in town saw anything?" "Lumiar is so small," Livia insisted, her voice low but firm. Renata shrugged. People have their lives, Livia. No one pays attention to others' lives all the time. Maria was a discreet person, always. But Livia knew that Maria, with her expansive way and gift for making friends, would never go unnoticed. It was a glaring contradiction. Later, Livia left her sister's house with a knot in her throat. The missing picture frame was the first crack in Renata's facade, a sign that something was deeply wrong. The rented car seemed even louder, the engine a protest against the charade. She drove to the main square, where the craft fair was beginning to dismantle. She looked for familiar faces, people who might have known Maria. She spotted Donna Rosa, the florist, a woman with an easy smile and curious eyes, whom Livia vaguely remembered from childhood. She approached, her heart pounding. The florist seemed the only hope for a loose thread, for a truth unfiltered by Renata. But what did Donna Rosa really know about Maria's disappearance, and why was Renata so intent on hiding what happened? Livia approached Donna Rosa with a mix of hope and apprehension. The florist, with her glasses perched on her nose and hands calloused from the soil, looked up, and a wide smile spread across her sun-weathered face. "My goodness, Livia, it's been so long. The girl looks more and more like Maria, your mother. How I miss her." Livia's heart tightened hearing her mother's name spoken so naturally, without Renata's coldness. "Donna Rosa, it's about my mother that I've come to speak. Do you know anything about her disappearance?" The florist frowned, her smile slowly fading. "Disappear? No, my dear. Maria. But she didn't disappear. She moved, went to live with Renata, didn't she? I always thought she was with her sister. The last time I saw her, she was selling some things from her house, saying she was going to live with her oldest daughter." The information hit Livia like a lightning bolt. Maria living with Renata. This had never been mentioned. Her sister had said Maria vanished, left no trace. It was a glaring contradiction, a chasm between the two versions. Donna Rosa continued, unaware of the turmoil in Livia's head. "Maria was always so attached to her things, you know. I remember she was sorting out some books and old recipes she cherished. A little blue notebook, with her handwriting all scribbled. She said she wouldn't part with it for anything, that it was a family treasure, a little blue notebook." Livia felt a flicker of realization. Maria was methodical, she kept everything, and Renata had said her mother was detached, that she hadn't taken anything. Another lie, unmasked by a simple but powerful detail. The conversation with Donna Rosa was a breath of fresh air, but also a heavy burden. Every word from the florist dismantled Renata's narrative, revealing a web of omissions. Livia thanked her, her head throbbing. The truth, she realized, was far more twisted than she had imagined. If Maria was with Renata, why did her sister deny it? And if she moved to Renata's house, why did she then disappear from there? What had happened between them? The absence of the picture frame on Renata's shelf now made even more sinister sense. It wasn't just a forgotten object. It was evidence of a rewritten history. What else had Renata removed or hidden? Livia felt the old distrust, the one that made her keep people at a distance, strengthen. It was hard to believe in any kindness when lies piled up like this, one upon the other. With Donna Rosa's information, Livia had a new starting point. Maria's old house. Renata had said it was closed, empty, with nothing inside. But if Maria moved there, perhaps there would be something. She drove through the cobblestone streets, the smell of fresh coffee from the bakeries mixing with the aroma of flowers. Little Lumiar, once a refuge of memories, now seemed a stage of secrets. Maria's house stood in a more secluded corner, surrounded by a garden that was once exuberant, but now overgrown with weeds. The paint was peeling, and the front window had a cracked pane. There were no signs that anyone had lived there for a long time. A wave of sadness washed over Livia. It was desolate to see her mother's home, a place so full of life in her memories, now abandoned. She approached the wooden door, feeling the weight of the key in her hand. Renata had reluctantly handed over a bunch of keys, claiming they were useless now. Would the house hold the answers she so desperately sought? Or would it just be another dead end in this painful search? Livia turned the rusty key in the lock, the creak echoing in the afternoon silence. The interior was dark and dusty, with that characteristic smell of a long-closed house. The faint light entering through the windows revealed furniture covered by white sheets like ghosts from the past. Maria had always been meticulous, and seeing everything like this, abandoned, was a shock. If she had moved to Renata's house, why was the furniture still here? Why hadn't it been sold or donated, as Renata had suggested? She began to remove the sheets, revealing the living room. The worn velvet sofa, the coffee table with cup marks, everything was there, intact but dusty. It didn't look like a house from which someone had moved out planned. It looked more like life had simply stopped. Livia felt the anguish tighten. Where would the little blue notebook Donna Rosa mentioned be? Where would the other treasures Maria cherished so much be? The house was a tomb of memories, and every object seemed to whisper an unanswered question. With each step, each sheet removed, the feeling that something very wrong had happened, and that Renata was at the center of it, grew in her chest. What secrets did that house and her own sister hold? Livia turned the rusty key in the lock, the creak echoing in the afternoon silence. The interior was dark and dusty, with that characteristic smell of a long-closed house. The faint light entering through the windows revealed furniture covered by white sheets, like ghosts from the past. Maria had always been meticulous, and seeing everything like this abandoned was a shock. If she had moved to Renata's house, why was the furniture still here? Why hadn't it been sold or donated, as Renata had suggested? She began to remove the sheets, revealing the living room, the worn velvet sofa, the coffee table with cup marks. Everything was there, intact but dusty. It didn't look like a house from which someone had moved out planned. It looked more like life had simply stopped. Livia felt the anguish tighten. Where would the little blue notebook Donna Rosa mentioned be? Where would the other treasures Maria cherished so much be? The house was a tomb of memories, and every object seemed to whisper an unanswered question. With each step, each sheet removed, the feeling that something very wrong had happened and that Renata was at the center of it grew in her chest. What secrets did that house and her own sister hold? Livia walked into her mother's bedroom, a room that once exuded the scent of lavender and talcum powder, now with still, dense air. On the nightstand, covered by a thin sheet, she found an old wooden box, the kind Maria used to keep jewelry and trinkets. Inside, among some costume jewelry and faded photos, there it was, a small blue notebook with Maria's unmistakable handwriting on the first page. The words jumped out at Livia, as if her mother was there, telling her own story. The first pages spoke of Maria's hope when moving into Renata's house, excited by the company and the promise of a quieter life with her eldest daughter. Maria wrote about her grandchildren, about the garden Renata promised, about the joy of no longer being alone. Livia felt momentary relief, thinking that perhaps Donna Rosa was right and the move had been consensual. But as Livia turned the pages, the tone changed. The notes became shorter, more bitter. Maria described the isolation, the feeling of being a nuisance, the arguments about money and space. She spoke of Renata complaining about bills, how her habits were disorganized, how her presence hindered her sister's social life. There was an entry, dated almost a year before the disappearance, which read, "Renata said she doesn't want me here anymore, that I'm a burden. Where will I go? My heart is in pieces." The notebook fell from Livia's hands. It wasn't a disappearance. Maria had been kicked out of her home by her own daughter. The shock was overwhelming, a punch to the gut that left her breathless. Everything Renata had said was an elaborate farce, a smokescreen to hide a cruel truth. The distrust Livia had felt from the beginning, that internal voice whispering about the fragility of kindness, now screamed a painful confirmation. That's why stories like this touch us so deeply, isn't it? We see ourselves in this fight for justice, for uncovering the truth someone tried to hide. If you also believe that the truth always comes out and that justice must be served, join us. Comment with "She vanished mom" and share your opinion. Your voice is an important part of our community. With trembling hands, Livia continued to leaf through the notebook. The last pages were a lament, the description of a helpless woman with nowhere to go. Maria wrote about looking for a place, about the shame of not having a roof over her head, about the fear of the unknown. There was no address, no concrete clue, just the pain of an abandoned mother. Livia felt a pang of guilt. While she built a successful life abroad, her mother was suffering, homeless, because of her sister. Rage boiled within her. Renata not only lied, She had betrayed her own mother, leaving her adrift. Livia needed more than Maria's words. She needed irrefutable proof, something that could confront Renata without leaving room for excuses. She searched the room with new energy, tearing off sheets, opening drawers, looking for anything that could give an address, a name, a trace of her mother. Under a pile of bedding at the back of a closet, Livia found an old folder full of documents, old bills, pharmacy receipts, and among them a crumpled brown envelope. Inside there was an eviction notice, dated a few months after Maria's last diary entry. The document was official, with the stamp of a Lumia notary, and confirmed that Maria had been legally evicted from Renata's house for non-payment of agreed expenses. This was not just a disappearance, it was abandonment. The eviction notice, along with Maria's diary, painted a dark and revolting picture. Renata not only expelled her mother, but used bureaucracy to formalize the abandonment. Maria hadn't vanished. She had been thrown onto the street. The word detached, spoken by Renata, echoed in Livia's mind, taking on an even more perverse tone. Maria wasn't detached. She was detached by force. That document was the missing piece, concrete proof of her sister's cruelty. Livia felt the ground beneath her feet collapse. The truth was far more cruel than any nightmare she could have imagined. With the notice in hand, Livia couldn't turn back. Naivety was over. The search for her mother, which began as a desire to fill a void, turned into a mission for justice. She needed to find Maria, and she needed Renata to pay for her actions. But where would Maria be now? And how would an elderly, fragile woman have survived alone on the streets? That mystery deepened, and Livia's pain mingled with an unwavering determination. The eviction notice, cold and impersonal, burned in Livia's hands. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the sentence of her own mother's abandonment signed by her sister. The image of Maria, always so vibrant, now mingled with the vision of an elderly, fragile woman left to fend for herself. The pain was a knot in her throat, but the rage, a fire that ignited an relentless determination. It wasn't enough to find Maria. She needed to understand every step of that fall, every scar that Renata's indifference had caused. Where would a homeless woman without support, without money, find refuge in Lumia? Livia carefully put away the diary and the eviction notice. Her next step couldn't be random. Maria didn't vanish into thin air. She was pushed out of a life, into a limbo. The city, once a backdrop of sweet memories, now seemed a labyrinth of cruelty. She knew that homeless people often sought shelter in specific places or received help from charities. Would that be the trail Maria left? She remembered the senior support center, a small, simple building near the main church where her mother used to volunteer. Perhaps there, among the social workers and volunteers, someone had seen Maria or knew where she might have gone. It was a faint hope, but the only one Livia had at that moment. With each curve, each street the rented car traversed, Livia's mind raced against time, imagining her mother's despair. How would Maria, such a proud woman, have dealt with the humiliation of being evicted and wandering aimlessly? Upon arriving at the support center, the scene was one of welcoming calm. Seniors chatted on wooden benches, some played dominoes, others read newspapers. Livia approached the reception, where a white-haired woman with a gentle smile, Donna Fatima, attended to her. "Good morning, my dear. How can I help you?" Livia explained her search, mentioning Maria's name, the uncertainty of her whereabouts. Donna Fatima pursed her lips, thoughtful. "Maria, yes, I remember her. Such a sweet lady, with a rather sad look in recent times." Those words, "rather sad look," pierced Livia. Maria, who was always sunshine, now remembered for sadness. Donna Fatima continued. "She came here a few times, yes, after she fell out with her daughter, Renata. Several times she asked for information about shelters, about how to get a place to stay. She even spent a night or two at the charity shelter in the Rosario neighborhood before disappearing for good." Livia felt a shiver. Charity shelter. It was a clue, but a clue that pointed to her mother's extreme vulnerability. Donna Fatima, with a sigh, looked through an old file. "Here it is. She registered once, almost a year ago, Maria de Luz Silva, and left an emergency contact, Renata's phone number." but she never returned. The shelter staff said she left one day and didn't come back, as if she vanished into thin air. The irony of Renata being the emergency contact, the same person who expelled her, was a cruel blow. There was still a glimmer of hope, however. Donna Fatima, with a compassionate look, took a small piece of paper and scribbled an address. "Look, Livia." Maria, before going to the shelter, tried to sell some of the handicrafts she made, to get some money. She mentioned she was negotiating with an antique shop nearby, on Rua das Flores. I don't know if anything came of it, but maybe he remembers her. Livia thanked her, her heart heavy. The information from the charity shelter was a knife to the chest, a confirmation that her mother, in fact, had gone through the most desperate situation. But the antique shop clue was a new thread. Why would Maria try to sell her crafts, something she loved to do passionately, if she wasn't in extreme need? And what would have happened after she left the shelter? What led her not to return, not to seek more help? With each answer, new questions arose, more painful and complex. The mystery deepened, and the figure of Maria, once strong and unshakable, now emerged as a woman struggling to survive, invisible to the world, even to her own daughters. Rua das Flores was narrow, with old houses and colorful storefronts. The antique shop, with its dusty window full of curious objects, seemed frozen in time. Livia entered, the bell on the door announcing her arrival. The smell of old wood and incense hung in the air. A bespectacled old man, with a long white beard, emerged from behind a counter full of books. "Good afternoon, how can I help you, young lady?" Livia introduced herself and, with a choked voice, asked about Maria. The antique dealer, Mr. Osorio, smiled softly. "Maria? Ah, yes. A very kind lady, with fairy hands for crochet. She brought me some pieces, baskets and little towels, but she was so downcast. She said she needed money to start over, to rent a small room. But I couldn't buy everything. The market is tough." With each word, Livia's face twisted into a grimace of pain. Start over. Rent a small room. Her mother, reduced to that. Mr. Osorio continued, unaware of Livia's anguish. "She left some pieces here for me to try and sell on consignment, but she never came back to collect the money or the remaining pieces. It's been almost a year. I even kept a small note she left, with a phone number and an address in case things changed." He took a small yellowed piece of paper from under the counter. The address was for a cheap boarding house on the roadside leading out of Lumiar, and the phone number was Renata's. Livia took the paper, feeling a chill. The note, simple and direct, was more proof of Maria's desperation. The boarding house on the roadside. Why would Maria go so far to such a humble boarding house and still leave the contact of the daughter who had abandoned her? It was a misdirection, a new dead end that led her away from the city onto an escape route. That note, a new piece of the puzzle, only heightened the feeling that something was missing, that Maria's story was even more complex and painful than she imagined. She needed to go to that boarding house. What else would she discover in that forgotten place on the roadside? Livia drove down the dusty road, the sun already beginning to set, painting the sky in orange hues over the Serra da Mantiqueira, a scene that contrasted with the darkness in her soul. The boarding house, an old building with a faded facade and an almost illegible sign, looked like a forgotten place. Livia's heart pounded. Would she find Maria there, or just another loose end in a tangle of lies? She parked, feeling the heavy air of the roadside, a mixture of dust and desolation. Upon entering, the atmosphere was stuffy and smelled of mold. A dark wooden counter and a sleepy old man, Mr. Joel, the owner, lifted his head. His eyes, behind thick glasses, carried the weight of many stories. Livia, her voice choked, showed Mr. Osorio's note. "My name is Livia. My mother, Maria de Luz Silva. Was she here?" Mr. Joel, with a tired look, took the note. "Maria. Yes, the crochet lady. Such a good woman, but so sad, with a look that seemed to carry the world. She stayed here for a few weeks, about 10 months ago, right after leaving her daughter's house, Renata's. She said she had nowhere else to go, that life had turned upside down." Mr. Joel's words echoed Maria's diary, confirming her helplessness. But did she leave? "Where to?" Livia asked, her voice almost a whisper, fearing the answer. Mr. Joel hesitated. "I can't say for sure, young lady, but one day she left in a hurry with a shopping bag and didn't come back. I saw her from afar walking down the road in that direction." He pointed to the highway, where cars sped by, their headlights already on. "She seemed lost, a homeless woman in that state. I tried to call her, but she didn't look back. She disappeared into the dust." The knot in Livia's throat tightened. Maria, alone, on the side of the road, with no destination. It was the confirmation of her worst fears. "Mr. Joel continued in a softer tone. "After a few days, a social worker came here asking about her. Maria had asked for help at the senior support center, and they were trying to locate her, offer shelter. But the social worker, Dr. Anna, told me that Renata, her daughter, had called the center, saying that Maria was with her, that she didn't need help, that it was all a misunderstanding. Dr. Anna was very angry, said Renata was hindering their work. That information was a brutal shock, a lightning bolt that split Livia's sky. Renata not only expelled Maria, she actively prevented her mother from receiving help, lying shamelessly to the authorities. It wasn't just a mission, it was calculated cruelty, a cold attempt to erase Maria from the map to make her invisible. Mr. Joel, noticing Livia's distress, extended a small card. Dr. Anna is very good at what she does. She left this here in case Maria returned or someone had news. She was very persistent in helping Maria. She felt there was something very wrong. Livia took Dr. Anna's card, feeling the strength of a new path opening. It was no longer a solitary search. There was someone who believed in Maria, who saw the injustice, who had the tools to act. That card, with a name, phone number, and the social service seal, was a beacon in the darkness, a real tool to fight for her mother. The image of Maria walking alone down the road, in that state, fixed itself in Livia's mind like a tattoo of pain and revolt. What Renata had done was unforgivable. Livia's distrust, which protected her from fragile kindnesses, transformed into an unwavering conviction that evil existed and was very close, dressed in a perfect facade. The antique dealer's note, the diary, the eviction notice, and now Mr. Joel's testimony and Dr. Anna's card. All the pieces fit into a scenario of deliberate abandonment, of a cruelty Livia never imagined her own sister capable of. The point of no return had been crossed. Livia would not rest until she found Maria and exposed the truth behind Renata's perfect and cold facade. The battle for her mother's justice was just beginning, and Livia was ready to fight with all her soul. Livia wasted no time. She called Dr. Anna, her voice choked but firm, recounting the entire story, every detail, every one of Renata's lies. The social worker, already familiar with Maria's case, listened intently, her indignation growing with each new piece of evidence. The blue-covered diary, the eviction notice, the antique shop's note, everything fit the narrative of cruel abandonment. Dr. Anna acted quickly, mobilizing social services and the police. It was time to bring the truth to light and rescue Maria from invisibility. The search was intense. With Livia's information and Dr. Anna's support network, Maria was located a few days later in an improvised shelter behind a small church on the outskirts of Lumiere. She was fragile, malnourished, but alive. The reunion of mother and daughter was a mixture of pain and relief, a tight embrace that tried to heal 6 years of absence and abandonment. The sight of her mother living on the streets, confirmed by her tired eyes and fragile body, was the cruel truth Livia had feared from the start. Renata was confronted. Dr. Anna, accompanied by Livia and an officer, presented the irrefutable evidence. The missing picture frame from Renata's shelf, Maria's diary detailing the expulsion, the eviction notice, the testimony of Mr. Joel from the boarding house, and even the antique shop's note, where Maria asked for help to start over. Each piece of evidence, once a loose detail, was now a hammer striking Renata's farce. The facade of a perfect life crumbled in seconds. If this story touches something you've experienced, an abandonment, an injustice that seemed endless, subscribe now and comment on what you would do in my place. Your support drives these stories, showing that no one is alone in the search for truth and justice. Renata tried to deny, to invent excuses, but the evidence was overwhelming. There was nowhere to run. The law would finally act. The abandonment of the elderly, failure to render aid, lying to support institutions, everything would be investigated. The tables had turned. The web of lies Renata wove to cover up her cruelty unraveled, revealing the true face of a daughter who exchanged love for convenience. The web of lies Renata wove to cover up her cruelty unraveled, revealing the true face of a daughter who exchanged love for convenience. The investigation, driven by irrefutable evidence and Livia's determination, moved swiftly. Renata, confronted by the law and community disapproval, couldn't maintain her facade. She faced the consequences of her actions, not just legal but social, losing the mask of perfection she so cherished. The modern house, once a symbol of her impeccable life, became a silent reminder of the emptiness of her heart. Maria, though deeply wounded, began a slow and painful process of recovery. Alongside Livia, she found the affection and support that had been denied her. Dr. Anna, with her tireless work, ensured Maria received all the necessary support to rebuild her life. Gradually, the woman Livia found fragile and malnourished began to flourish again, rediscovering the dignity and joy of living that Renata's cruelty had tried to steal. Livia's embrace was a safe harbor, a promise that true love, though tested, could indeed be kept. Livia's journey, filled with pain and cruel revelations, also brought healing to her own wounds. She realized that distrust, that belief that all kindness was fragile, did not apply to the unconditional love she now shared with her mother. Intimacy, once feared, became the greatest strength to rebuild bonds and heal the past. She learned that truth, however hard, is the only path to justice and peace. The courage to seek her mother, to unravel every lie, transformed her, showing that fighting for what is right is worth every effort. And so, poetic justice manifested itself. Renata's cruelty was exposed and punished, and Livia's love brought redemption to Maria. The story of mother and daughter became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of fighting for those we love, even when the world seems to turn its back. Because in the end, genuine family connection, the one Livia sought so deeply, was the compass that would guide her back home, to herself and to her mother's unwavering love. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel now. Leave your comment and your like. Tell us where you're watching from so I can acknowledge you in future chapters. Use the hashtag #JuckHomelessMom to share your thoughts. Thank you for staying until the end and supporting our channel.